Thank you, Garth. Thanks everyone. Great to see such a good crowd today. And not only that we had such a great crowd this morning, but that you're all still here. So that's always a positive thing. We have heard about it from the very beginning of today's session. Public diplomacy, most simply described as diplomatic engagement with people. And it is, as Paul Sharp, a diplomacy scholar, describes, an idea whose time has come. In today's multipolar, polylateral world of multiple actors, pens here, diverse and interconnected interests, shared problems, and real-time communications, public diplomacy has become essential to the task of conducting foreign policy. Drawing on contributions from across disciplines and interlinking developments in scholarship with innovations in practice, it continues to evolve and adapt to the changing and challenging global landscape. Get this right. It's worth noting that public diplomacy today has a slightly different agenda than in years gone past. It's moved away from the one-way, information push propaganda model of the Cold War towards a model that is based on genuine cooperation and collaboration with interconnected communities, where credibility and authenticity are its currencies, and where it works through networks of influence. Reinforcing a relational view and policy relevance, Kathy Fitzpatrick suggests that public diplomacy's fundamental purpose is to help a nation establish mutually beneficial relationships with strategic publics that can advance national interests. Bruce Gregory builds on the scope and breadth of public diplomacy's agenda when he talks about it as an instrument to understand cultures, attitudes and behaviours, to build and manage relationships, to influence thoughts and mobilise actions, to advance values and interests. It is a Janus-face endeavour, starting by facing inwards today towards a domestic population, to shape and engage in discussions of identity and narrative, and focusing also outwards to engage people in the discussion and dialogue. Australia has at times resisted and struggled to keep pace with public diplomacy, particularly with its new agenda. An enduring preoccupation with image projection, the destination, the lifestyle, the beaches, sporting heroes, and the wildlife, dare I say it, Lisa, the koalas, have all shaped practice. However, recent shifts, particularly within foreign policy circles, signal that Australia's catching up, starting to catch up. It's an uneven catch-up, less like the jazzy dance that scholars like Jan Mellison refer to when they talk about public diplomacy, but perhaps more of an awkward cha-cha-cha. 2 steps forward, 2 steps back, and 2 to the side. There it is. I won't demonstrate. I'm not that good. Although I did try to find a picture of Hugh Jackman doing the cha-cha-cha. I'm sure there's one out there. So my paper for this journal edition is really about examining the forwards, backwards and sidewards movement of Australia's public diplomacy. I do talk about some key shifts that do move us forwards. A new emphasis within the department, the reinvigoration of public diplomacy. A new emphasis on connecting to people and actually building relationships and networks, utilising the vehicles of education, of sport, of science, for example. Engaging in dialogue and also bringing civil society into the process, not just as targets, but also as co-producers and partners in public diplomacy's endeavour. But there are backward steps too. Generally speaking, I think these are a reflection of the external forces, those forces outside the department, like budget cuts, and we've heard a lot about that, the relentless impact of budget cuts. They've had a consistent and fairly deep impact on Australia's public diplomacy, as well as a disjointed policy and public diplomacy relationship that continues to act as a significant constraint on demonstrating Australia's place in the world and in the region. Alongside these factors, there is a fundamental challenge as well, and something that Australia should really think about grappling with, and that is to address the conceptual gap that exists between public diplomacy and its soft power underpinnings that contribute to a nation's standing and influence. This is a part of the paper that I won't really go into for today's discussion, except to say that, like you, Stuart, being sick of reading papers on ping-pong diplomacy, I'm a little bit tired of reading about Nye's model of soft power. In terms of its application to the Australian context, it is underdone, and it is time for us to really invigorate a discussion about what soft power means for Australia, but also for the Indo-Pacific region. But let's move to Australian public diplomacy. I'm wondering if I've missed some slides. I don't think so. Here we go. It was in August 2007, in fact, I think give or take a week, it was about eight years ago this month, that the Senate inquiry into the nature and conduct of Australian public diplomacy concluded that when it comes to Australian public diplomacy, the whole is not as great as the sum of the parts. Australian public diplomacy was revealed at that time to be adrift on the periphery of foreign policy, undercut by a lack of political support, understanding and will, not to mention the funding. Public diplomacy was seen as nice but not essential. Organisational leadership and capacity was undermined by staffing turnover that moved with the regularity of a revolving door. Coordination across government agencies was unwieldy and ineffective. The Indian student crisis of 2009, amplified by India's ferocious 24/7 media cycle, provided the necessary impetus for a shift in direction. Without the necessary networks of goodwill, the depth and breadth of relationships in place to cushion the impact of those various incidents, negative effects were enlarged for Australia. Lingering notions of Australia as a racist nation reverberated through the media and through the region. International student enrolments dropped significantly, as did the value of this significant services export for Australia. The crisis pushed Australian public diplomacy into overdrive and provided a really timely reminder of Edward R. Murrow's quite famous point that public diplomacy adds value not just in the crash landings, but also during the takeoffs, and I would add to that in the in-between times as well. Perhaps then it's no coincidence that the more positive developments in Australian public diplomacy have actually coincided with the appointment of Peter Varghese, High Commissioner to India during the student crisis, now Departmental Secretary. In one of his early speeches, Peter Varghese reminded his audience of public diplomacy's inescapable importance, especially for Australia. Its ultimate goal to reach beyond the negotiations between governments or the transactions of traders, and to tell a story about who we are, what inspires us, and what do we seek to be as a nation. I'd actually go further to say it's also about understanding our own worldview, but importantly the worldview of others. The subsequent appointment of Foreign Minister Julie Bishop has provided a necessary and timely reinforcement. Bishop appears intuitively to understand the role and relevance of public diplomacy, not just in her own positioning, not just in the projection of a positive image, but also in building the breadth and depth of Australia's relationships, people to people. Her signature policy platform, it's been mentioned already, the New Colombo Plan speaks directly to this point. Much like its predecessor, Asia Bound, in concept, the New Colombo Plan, what is different about the New Colombo Plan is that for the first time, it places outbound student mobility firmly within foreign policy heartland. Sitting alongside the Australia Award scholarships, it underscores the value of international education's two-way flow, not just in transactional or commercial terms, but for Australia's engagement, person to person, within the region. Public diplomacy, of course, continues to have its gala moments. Australia's presence at the Shanghai Expo, initiatives supporting Australia's campaign for a seat on the UN Security Council, and dialogue platforms surrounding the G20 presidency, for example, have all been seen as largely successful. Each in its own way has raised Australia's visibility and contributed to Australia's normative positioning on the global stage. Australia's participation in Eurovision, I have to say I'm a fan. I thought was actually, an interesting demonstration of Australia's cultural presence in the world. Combine that with Australia taking up a permanent position at the Venice Biennale, one of 25, I should say, is significant. Similarly, the recent gifting of koalas to Singapore to commemorate 60 years of independence and the bilateral relationship served as a highly visible, very sellable, cute reminder of the longevity of Australia's relationships within the region. The advertising value generated by those two koalas sitting in first class provided a sizable bonus. While the big ticket items are great and we enjoy them, they're visible, they have a place in public diplomacy, they are limited in time and sustainability and ultimately in their soft power value. And this is where understanding the many facets of soft power and what makes it up can be very important to calibrating public diplomacy initiatives. But more encouraging, I think, in the last couple of years, probably the last 12 to 18 months, have been the relationships that Australia has started to build and continues to build. Key initiatives in the area of sport and science, for example, where Australia not only has something to offer, but also something to learn, are quite critical. Engaging with strategic global audiences, including alumni and diaspora, demonstrate a commitment to building people-to-people connections. Many of these initiatives are not new. Engaging local audiences, especially young people, for example, in a friendly game of cricket, has probably been on the itinerary list of diplomatic missions for time immemorial. Check the guest list of any diplomatic function held over the last 50 years, and I guarantee you will find alumni there. What is different is a commitment to mutuality, to the sustainability of relationships over time. For example, alumni engagement aims to facilitate lasting relationships centred on a commitment to this mutual benefit. The what's in it for me has been replaced by a what's in it for us. I really have to skip quite a bit. So what I'm going to do is very quickly cover a couple of key challenges. In terms of these positive aspects of public diplomacy, where I think there are critical challenges is the style of leadership that DFAT continues to engage with. It's moving away from the style of controlled leadership, heroic or hierarchical leadership, to a positioning of facilitation, allowing networks to form, to be generated, to sustain themselves, rather than controlling their activity. Harnessing two-way, the cumulative benefits of friendships, experiences, goodwill can be enormously difficult, and it will never be achieved to the fullest benefit, I'm sure, but being able to tap into the right networks will be critical. Understanding audiences, listening, including through social media, will be important. One thing I'd like to note, we've heard a little bit about the integration. I think whilst many might say that it's had a negative effect on Australia's aid program broadly, I think that we have seen a positive impact on the way that Australia conducts its public diplomacy. There has been an influx of new skills in outreach and partnerships, building relationships on the ground, not just in the diplomatic bubble, that I think has been important across DFAT, but especially within the public diplomacy branch. So, while all of these things demonstrate a distinct motion forwards, there are steps backwards. The efficiency dividends, for example, levelled against the ABC last year, which resulted in the axing of the Australian network and effective decimation of Radio Australia and the loss of our shortwave radio capacity in the Pacific Islands, has been incredibly detrimental. The Australian network's replacement, Australia Plus, offers a potential reach to audiences that is actually greater than that the Australian network had. However, there are some significant constraints in the way that broadcasting occurs. Australia Plus digital platforms offering important English language programs and novelty apps. If you haven't heard of Bobby the Lavender Bear, please look him up. It's a great little cute public diplomacy story. These are popular and they have enormous take-up, particularly with audiences and expats in Asia. But the loss of shortwave capacity is problematic, particularly in the Pacific, where shortwave remains currency and digital networks are expensive to tap into. When coupled with the cuts made to the Australia Awards this year, one might actually start to see an identifiable trend away from supporting Australia's relationships in the Pacific and in favour of commercially attractive prospects to the north. The second major challenge, just quickly, relates to what I would say is a policy-public diplomacy disconnect. I'll highlight one example. Oh, if I can. Oh, that's interesting.
Goes off when you turn
Oh
it up.
dear. This is actually important. I'll see if I can just quickly bring it up. The Department of Immigration and Border Protection has taken a visible lead on Australia's public diplomacy and efforts surrounding our immigration, refugee and asylum seeker policy. Information campaigns like this, featuring the map of Australia with a line through it, you would never see coming out of DFAT's public diplomacy area. They're accompanied by a series of images of boats languishing at sea, as well as a graphic novel relating to asylum seekers in distress with mental health problems, languishing in offshore processing centres. There's a multi-million-dollar teledrama on the way. Targeting audiences, particularly in Afghanistan, Iran and Pakistan, these images are vastly out of step with Australia's broader public diplomacy efforts, promoting Australia as a contemporary and, believe it or not, open society. As Philip Sieb notes, the assumption that public diplomacy can move in one direction while policy goes in another shows how little understanding exists of what public diplomacy can and cannot do. So to finish, I'm not sure that I'm going to get this. I'm doing the cha-cha-cha. Much like the cha-cha-cha, public diplomacy presents a challenging combination of footwork, rhythm and timing, not to mention working with potentially a multiplicity of unwieldy partners. It is anything but straightforward. There are numerous opportunities for trip-ups and missteps. But where the elements come together, timing, pace, rhythm, coordination, even partnerships, as a part of a larger whole, it can result in an impressive outcome demonstrating style, substance and coherence, the stuff of soft power.